Alright, so I'm making this video because I need to get my car smogged. I live in California, and I have a whole bunch of bolt-ons that I need to remove and change back to stock just to pass a visual inspection. So for right now, I am going to start with the 3-port boost controller right there. If you can see it, I'm gonna start with labeling the lines. 3-port boost controller, you have 3 lines, one going to your intake. If you have a bung, that's where it will go. The other one goes to your compressor outlet, and then the other one goes to your wastegate. So I'm just labeling it because I'm gonna reinstall it and I want to make sure I get it right. Furthermore, so the only thing I'll be changing is the intake, which is this AMS intake. I'm gonna try to leave the lower intercooler piping and try to hide it with the stock intake. I have also intercooler. I don't know if you can see it, but that wouldn't be changed out. I checked under the appendix for carb, and that seems to be okay. As far as visual intercooler, you can swap an intercooler with any car and it should pass visual. It shouldn't affect any emissions or anything. But intercooler piping, it wasn't specific, so I mean it all depends with the technician if he passes or fails it. Also, I forgot to mention why I'm removing the 3-port boost controller and not leaving it on there. The reason is because once I go back to a stock cat and a stock intake, I'm gonna have to change the tune, and the tune that I have for stock is not a tune with 3-port boost controllers, so I don't want to risk of throwing a code of over boosting or anything like that, you know. I just want to take it to the shop, get a smog check, and call it a day. So that's the reason why I'm gonna go back to its stock solenoid boost controller. The 3-port boost controller is removed. You just use the same stock screw or bolt to bolt on the boost controller, and right here you can see I labeled the vacuum lines for compressor outlet and also for your intake bung and your wastegate. As the stock boost controller goes, Mitsubishi made it technician proof. So right here, these 2 lines would be going to your other controller that's already connected. Right here, those 2 lines. And they're also color coded, red and white, or red and yellow, below that, yeah, red and yellow. So you see your red line right here and yellow line right here would go into those slots right there, those connections. And as far as this white line, this is the one that goes to your intake bung. So once you place your intake elbow, you would connect this vacuum line, this white line, to your intake bung. And they also color coded these vacuum lines, so this red one right here would go to your wastegate, and this one right here would go to your compressor outlet. And for this one, you also want to make sure before you connect these, you want to make sure you have the boost pill and that hasn't been removed, otherwise you'll be over boosting. To install the stock boost control, but since it's out of the way and all those vacuum lines are out of the way, I think it would be easier for me to remove this AMS intake and then install the stock elbow intake or elbow piping. And it will make it much easier and have more room. So for the intake, I'm gonna start off with the MAP sensor. Last time I had trouble removing these screws, so it almost came to a point where I was actually gonna break this MAP. So you got to be really careful with these screws. I went to this AutoZone and bought this socket so I could just remove those screws. Also, when it comes to this intake, I'm gonna have to remove this diverter valve. I'm still gonna keep this vacuum line. I'm gonna have to modify this diverter valve piping or hose, whatever you want to call it, because with this map lower intercooler piping, the way it's welded, your diverter valve piping, it's sitting way higher than your stock lower intercooler piping. You also want to be really careful with this MAP sensor. They're real sensitive. So after this, I'm gonna place it inside the car so it won't get damaged. Next, I'm gonna start bolting all these. What else? I'm gonna start removing clamp clips that hold the vacuum lines for your valve cover. What else? I have to unbolt this heat shield. For the hose clamps actually range the socket ranges from like 10 to 8 millimeters in metric size. So yeah, so I wouldn't know what your setup is, just know you need sockets to remove the hose clamps. And what I'm gonna use to remove these vacuum hose clips right there is needle nose. Makes it a lot easier to remove those clips. For the heat shield, there's 2 bolts right here. Use 12 metric to remove it, and I use an extension along with a ratchet, obviously. And these 2 same hose is where that actual bracket that holds your intake manifold, your stock one. So you're just gonna place this one. Alright, next off, I'm going to remove this vacuum hose. Put it to the side. And the next thing is to remove this coupler right here that holds your elbow. As you can see, the AMS intake elbow is removed. Thing that warn you guys about, when you have an opening like this, you should put like FME, what we call in the service. It's a foreign material exclusion, just to make sure, it's like a cap, just to make sure that nothing goes in there. That could damage the blades of the turbo. What else? So coming here to the stock elbow, as you can see, I left the stock clamp in here. Makes it a lot easier, know where the clamps go. That way I don't lose them either. And I'm gonna go ahead and start off by installing the elbow, connecting the vacuum line that goes to the boost controller and your valve cover breather. For me to put this boost controller, like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and install it. There's enough room. I don't have to move around the intake elbow. And like I mentioned before, this red hose goes to your wastegate, and this other hose goes to your compressor outlet. Go ahead and put them there like so. Put that clip, make sure that vacuum line doesn't pop off. So compressor outlet and wastegate vacuum hoses are in for your boost solenoid. You're gonna mount the solenoid right here. Like I mentioned, I'm gonna repeat myself again. This yellow colored vacuum hose will go to the yellow portion of the other boost controller, and the red one would go to the red portion of the boost controller. This white one right here goes to your intake elbow bung. And now we are going to move to the stock intake elbow. Let me make sure I have the right socket. Pretty sure it's a 10. Yep, 10. Gonna go ahead and put it on there. Guess I'm gonna have to loosen it up some more. It's too tight. Want to make sure it seats properly on the compressor side of the turbo. Once you ensure yourself that it seats properly, you need to ensure that the clamp is sitting all the way around your intake elbow. You don't want to have any type of leaks. Your diverter valve you would attach here. But since I have an aftermarket lower intercooler piping, as you can see, they welded the diverter piping way up top. On a stock intercooler piping, I wish I had my stock intercooler piping so I could show you guys. The piping is setting way lower. This diverter valve or hose, it would be sitting way too high. Way too high. So what I might have to do is trim some of the hose off, measure it correctly, so it would appear to look stock for the inspector or the technician. Right, so here is the trimmed stock diverter valve hose. As you can see, I had to cut some piece off, trim some part of it, and then I made sure that T-clamped it with this T-clamp, so make sure it wouldn't leak. It shouldn't leak, but I'm gonna test drive it, make sure I have no boost leaks or anything once I finish installing everything. I'm gonna wait for the diverter valve because I'm gonna see how the intake lines up with the elbow right here, and see if I have to remove anything or loosen this hose up and see if I have to move it out the way. Right, so next is going to be your diverter valve, and you install it like so. And lastly, your vacuum lines, like I said, the one that goes to your intake elbow, and the one for the valve cover over here, that head over here. And lastly, your MAP sensor, and this could only go one way. It has an arrow where it's the air is supposed to go to. So there's no way you can mess it up. It's technician proof. Careful. Seating properly. I need to go ahead. Bolt it on. So here's a finished product of the intake. Going back to stock for the smog check. Place this plastic right here. I still have yet to put these 2 clips because I want to make sure I have no leaks, and I don't want to be removing those pain in the ass clips. As you can see, we put the stock diverter valve, elbow, stock boost solenoid, and the stock intake box. We left the aftermarket lower intercooler piping. As you can see, maybe you can see the welds. Like I said again, I had to modify this diverter valve piping or hose in order for it to fit properly, make it look stockish, if that's a word. Next, what we would have to do is turn the tune back to stock using the access port. Here we go. Change it back to stock mode because I can't leave it in the tune that I was tuned by a local tuner, because he deleted the O2 sensor, so it would show as O2 sensor not ready, and that would automatically fail the smog. So we're gonna go to stage 0. Alright, press OK, and then just wait for it to reboot itself. Once it's done flashing, we are going to turn it on and take it for a test drive, make sure there's no leaks, no crazy overboost, especially since I just went from a 3-port boost controller to back to the stock boost controller. Alright, this is do not turn off, please wait while the access port resets. Alright, change of mag successful. Please turn the ignition key off. Wait 15 seconds, but forget that. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on. See what's Gucci. And then we're gonna run some logs, make sure everything's legit.